Hi, this is Sarah from Illuminati Hotties, and you're listening to Consequence.
This is Ren Graves, news editor at Consequence, and I'm here with our September Artist of the Month, Sarah from Illuminati Hotties. It's a great privilege.
Hey.
Sarah is an awesome musician and one of the finest lyricists of her generation, using colloquial language and internet slang to achieve an emotional potency that has rarely been matched. Her new album, Let Me Do One More, is out October 2nd via her own Snack Shack Tracks. How are you doing, Sarah?
Great. That was such a beautiful intro. Thank you. Wow.
Well, I really enjoy your music. I'd love to ask you more about your songwriting process. There's a lot of wit in the lyrics, not just jokes, but sharp observations. And even the way you use wordless tunes is unexpected. I'm thinking of those ahs in Threatening Each Other, ReCapitalism, which if you just hear it and you're not paying attention, it could almost be like a soft ooh. But in the context of the lyrics, it lands like this quietly desperate scream. When you start to write a song, do you usually begin with the words first or the music first?
They sort of come together. I think, I'll usually have a lyrical idea of a couple lines that just kind of naturally has melody woven into it, I think, or like a rhythmic cadence woven into it. And that's usually how it starts. And I just sort of have like many, many, many chunks of 2 to 4 lines of lyrics that in my brain are connected melodically in some way, usually.
And the development of each song, it goes hand in hand, or do you sometimes like, oh, I have an idea for a phrase and that comes first, or how do the songs come together?
In all sorts of ways, really. I think mainly, I at least have like a verse and a chorus, and then I sort of fill in the missing pieces as the song comes more together, or I'm thinking about the production, or I'm thinking about how the band's going to play it. So yeah, I want to say it all sort of happens simultaneously. Some songs just start as, guitar and voice, and then I figure out how to recontextualize them for the record. But it all feeds into itself, I guess.
With that song, Threatening Each Other, ReCapitalism, I feel like there's a lot of anger in that song, but also a lot of it takes place at a party with friends. Where did that come from?
The way that the world works and that our country works right now, we're sort of trapped in this machine where we're forced to participate in the way that capitalism has been laid out in America, both in a social way and an economic way. And as much as I want to make that system go away, so there's more room for people who are oppressed by it to survive and succeed, it's something that's like very real and currently very inescapable. So just sort of being at a party, thinking about all the bullshit and like kind of just like thinking about the small steps we can do to affect change for the future, I guess, is sort of where it came from.
What would a more ideal system look like to you?
No rent, free pizza. No, I think mostly
you've got my vote.
Yeah, mostly I just, I think that there should at least be a little more room for people in lower income brackets and people of color, people of different demographics, to make their way and to have access to the same stuff that the top percentage of American wealth has.
Getting back to the album, Let Me Do One More. Did you start with a mood board or a specific song? What was the initial creative impulse?
So I had just been sort of collecting songs over the course of in between tours and, on the road even. I had just sort of been like making voice notes and making songs one at a time. And then when I had a chunk of time to actually get into the studio to track drums and bass, I went in with a list of about like 25 to 30 song ideas, and some were fully finished to the point where like we'd been playing them on stage, so it was very easy to record. And some were just a verse and some form following it, or the chords that I needed to fill the lyrics in a little more, or, there was really a wide range of like finished to not finished, but I wanted to get as much drums and bass and, basic guitar and sort of like the skeleton of the songs as possible with the studio time that we had. Then after that, I just sort of produced one song at a time from beginning to end and whittled it down more and more and more, and took it to the form that it's in now. It took a long time, but it was kind of like a combination of seeing through as many ideas to the end as I could, and then deciding what fit into the album, as well as just what I liked the best.
So you said you had like 25 to 30 ideas that you then whittled down. Do you have plans for the ideas that didn't make it onto this album?
Totally. There's definitely a few songs that got to the finish line, but didn't really make it on the track listing for the album. And I think those songs could come out at some point, whether that's on the next record or as singles or whatever. There's definitely a handful of tunes that I like and that just didn't really have a place on this album, as well as just having sort of song seeds for a lot of other ideas that, hello.
Please introduce your collaborator.
Oh, yes. That was Zeus over here.
Zeus?
We've got Zeus on the couch. And
Zeus,
we've got
golden god.
Maybe in the corner.
How many, do you have 2 dogs or?
Yeah, 2.
It's a good number of dogs.
It's good. They love each other. They keep each other busy.
That's great. I have a number of cats and 2 of them hate each other.
They hate each other.
Right now they do. They're in the middle of a fight. We're trying to mediate them, work it out. Some group therapy.
Aww.
So speaking of collaborators, when you go into the studio, I don't know. I always think that one of the most underrated skills, or one of the skills that we on the sort of outside of the recording process don't have a great grasp on, is communication around the vision, right? Mm-hmm. You talk about, well, we're going to get some drums and some bass down, but like the process of what kind of drum or what kind of bass is really important, and we don't see it. So how do you communicate your ideas to your collaborators?
I mean, with drums specifically, I used to play drums, and I played all the drums on the first record. So I feel like I have a little more of a grasp of how to communicate that. So it's a little bit like I try not to get too micromanagey and just sort of give the like general vibe or groove that I want the bassist and the drummer to follow. And often a lot of it is about putting it in their hands in some ways and understanding that they're better at those instruments than I probably will ever be at this point. So between knowing their instruments and then knowing my taste, I think they end up putting together a really good understanding of the songs. And also just kind of going in and working it out, the 3 of us in the room together, we've managed to come up with a lot of useful elements that ended up getting included in the record. So it's a little bit of jamming it. It's a little bit of telling people exactly what to play or when to be in or out. But yeah, I try and let them do at least a little bit of their own, orchestration on their instrument. But sometimes I get carried away for sure.
So you played drums on Kiss Your Frenemies?
Yeah.
I didn't know that. What other instruments do you play?
I play kind of everything. I mean, I started on piano as a little kid, and then I played drums and ended up going to college to play drums. And then I play guitar in the band and on stage. So I do kind of, jack of all trades and whatever needs to get recorded in the studio. And also I love to have people on board that can knock it out a little more quickly or a little more powerfully than I can.
Do you have any dream instruments that you hope to learn someday?
I always wish I could play like a brass instrument. And I've picked up a couple just to like noodle around, and it's like seemingly impossible. Like it needs a lot of lung capacity. You need a lot of like power and, lip embouchure stuff going on. And it's just, I can only get like one or two notes out.
Yeah. I tooled around with brass for a while. My lips just don't do that.
Yeah.
They don't do the things really they need difficult.
To do. Yeah.
You said you played piano when you were a kid. How old were you when you started?
I started when I was about 7, I want to say. And I just begged my mom for piano lessons. And the only teacher that, at that time I was like 5 or 6, and the only teacher that she knew of that was like around where we lived wouldn't take kids under a certain age because she didn't want to be babysitting, basically. But I wanted to be there so badly, and I had to wait like a year, and then I went in and just started learning how to read music and, make tunes.
Did it live up to your expectations when you were too young to be allowed in?
Yeah, I think it was really fun. I had been afforded the opportunity to try a little bit of little league sports, and like was just so not athletic and so not a star in the outdoor sports world. So I think I was really excited to have a hobby that I kind of had a knack for and could understand and could engage with at all times, as far as like being able to listen to recorded music and watch stuff on TV. And I really was engaged in all the different parts of music that I could find out about as a kid.
So what is your earliest musical memory?
My earliest musical memory was I was probably in kindergarten-ish age, and the LA Phil used to put on a kids' day where they would play Peter and the Wolf, and they had some kind of screen, with animation. They had a narrator, and before the show, there were like members of the LA Phil that were outside of the theater that were like, showing you kids how to like do trombone or play violin. Like they kind of were doing a little bit of show and tell with their instruments. My grandparents took me to go see that performance.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So getting back to this album, sorry, I keep getting sidetracked by these interesting little anecdotes. First track, I believe the opening line of Let Me Do One More is going to be, in every life, there is a bell, one rounded curve of time or tell. Is that right? I'm on the left half looking over.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because it's this very, very summary single, but the image is it's a bell curve, right? It's so could you please explain why you wanted to use that image in this particular song? And
totally. Yeah. I think I really also am a nerd about first lines of records. I think that's like such a cool moment to decide like the tone of an entire album is like in the first lyrical moment. But yeah, it is a bell curve, and we can think about a lot of art as being on one side or the other, or really kind of anything as being on one side or the other of a bell curve. Like I kind of think of it as like the left side, at least musically, the left side being art or like more esoteric or more, out stuff, and the right side being more craft, sort of following the rules to achieve the perfect, thing. Like a Katy Perry song would be on the right side of the bell curve because they've cracked the code on like what works as far as what people want to listen to in top 40 radio or something. So I guess in that moment, I wanted to put myself peering over sort of the ledge of like how to be a little more conformist than I walk around life and fit into society. But yet I'm stuck on the left side in sort of a way where like, I don't really know how to like necessarily code myself to be like in a room of like regular 9 to 5 people in a relationship context or in a you know, working human context or a social context or whatever. So I guess it's just sort of pointing, that's kind of a very weird ranty version of saying that, like, I'm on the sort of younger part of my life of not really knowing what's next and peering over to the other side.
Gotcha. You said that you were a nerd about opening lines. What are some of your favorites?
One that really sticks out is there's a Finn Reagan album called The End of History. And the first line of the album is, if you happen to be reading this, Rose was born. And it just like immediately puts you in this thing where you're like, what is going on? Like, who is he sending letters to somebody? Like, what is the relationship between these people? Like, there's a baby, there's, you know, there's some kind of like tortured communication happening. And it's just such a beautiful way to lay out that album.
The story starts in the middle almost.
Yeah, exactly.
And you were talking about that sort of more commercial art, sort of mathematically correct art, the Scandinavian school of songwriting. Do you think that what people are looking for, or what hits as mathematically correct, is constant over time, or do you think it changes?
I think it changes. I think there's some things that exist across the decades of recorded history that fly still today. Like, I think that a good catchy chorus works in 1950 in the same way that it works in 2021. And I think there's sort of, whether or not people were doing it formulaically, you know, back in like the golden era of recording, I think sometimes they were, sometimes they weren't. But in a lot of ways, they were just, you know, breaking and restructuring song forms and seeing what worked and what didn't, and trying to catch people's ears. And I think, you know, today there's a lot more sort of riding on it financially. There's a lot more riding on it in like an optics way, I guess. So they do involve, you know, like people with degrees to analyze pop songs and sort of predict how that's going to land with people. And there's always going to be people who just write great songs and it works and it hits and everybody loves it. But there's also sort of a world of commercial music that is based upon what seemingly has always worked.
What are there certain artists or kinds of that very commercial music that you were talking about that really attract you?
Yeah, you know, I love the new Casey Musgraves record. I do think that she and her collaborators work from a more artful perspective. Like, I don't think that they're running it by label people to like run numbers, seemingly, from what, you know, from what I've just understood listening to interviews with those people or whatever. It seems like they are truly expressing and capturing sort of a very commercial version of that expression. So yeah, I love Casey. I love Caroline Polachek. I love Carly Rae Jepsen. I love Ariana Grande. There's a lot of good pop out there. I don't want to sound cynical about how that music is created, because I am usually a poptimist and I usually am finding stuff that I absolutely love in top 40 music.
It's interesting that you talk about Casey Musgraves. I've been thinking about her a lot recently. There's this story about the writing of Slow Burn, where, you know, she told them it's like, she was microdosing acid. And so her collaborators created all of these like Far East effects, and they were really going sort of late period Beatles psychedelic with it. And she had them strip it all down. And I think one of her great gifts is the power of knowing when to cut something, when to stop something. Are there any experiences that you have had where something has gotten better by cutting something out of it or saying no? Totally.
Yeah. I will say that I feel like I'm still learning that trick a little bit. And especially in Illuminati Hotties stuff, I tend to go maximal. But sometimes you just have a great song, and why would you ruin that with any random stuff you could throw on top of that? And I think that is where the success of Casey's stuff lies, is that she has great writing, that she could just sit and play with a guitar and fly. Sorry, there's a dog barking outside that my dogs are now barking at. Anyway, welcome to the zoo. This is Maybe.
Hi, Maybe. Oh.
So yeah, I think that that's an important mindset to have, especially when making a record where the songs really can stand alone, is that you don't really need to dress it up. So why would you go overboard when what you're really trying to highlight is the lyrics and the melody?
How did you end up in touch with Buck Meek?
I emailed him. I sent an email over and was like, he seemed like the perfect voice for that moment. And I sort of had in my mind that I wanted this like dark Sam Elliott cowboy voice. And then I was listening to the Buck Meek record and I was like, this is perfect. Like, he has exactly the voice for speaking this part. And it's just sort of this twangy, lonesome traveler. And that is like so Buck's essence to me.
So you had written that already?
Yes.
The spoken word section? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And what was it like working with him? Was it all over email, or how did it come together?
Yeah, it was all over email. You know, we were, I think that he lives in LA too, but you know, I had no idea where he was at the point of emailing him. And we were sort of like in the middle, deeply in the middle of pandemic stuff. And I know he has the ability to just record out of his own spot. So he just sent me something.
And then I'd love to hear a little more about, oh gosh, I don't know if I'm going to pronounce, but I would pronounce
yes, moo. I've been calling it moo.
You've been calling it moo. Okay. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, I sense a lot of like anger and sarcasm in the track. Where did it come from?
You know, a long time ago, sort of near the beginning of Illuminati Hotties' slow building hype, I guess, for lack of a better word, there were some industry folks that came out to see us and then kind of ghosted us. And I later heard from like a friend of a friend that they just were kind of thought it was too glittery, too cute, and too like, you know, sneering, I guess, for them to be interested in it. And that's what kind of started the song. I don't know. It's just sort of a criticism on like people being haters.
At what point did you know that you were going to title it that?
You know, it's just, it's like a onomatopoeia, I guess, of the chorus. And so
yeah,
I just was like, oh, I'll just name the song after the chorus, which is oh. Ah, yeah.
You used to be with Tiny Engines, but they were engaging in some behavior that was, well, how would you describe it?
It was just uncool, you know, and it wasn't living up to the ethos that they had laid out for the artists that they represented. And someone finally decided to call them out on it. And then everything fell apart because they still haven't really ever said anything publicly sort of about what happened or how they had planned on remedying it with artists.
So you still haven't heard anything from them
I keep in touch with them for the purposes of like, they own Kiss Your Frenemies. And so like, we have to get statements on that. And, other than that though, it's pretty quiet.
And then, how did Snack Shack Tracks come about?
Snack Shack was always sort of the name that I had put on like my studio and my, publishing side of things. And it was just sort of a a name I had somehow randomly chosen. I feel like to like represent the sort of logistic side of my music making stuff. And then Hopeless Records gave us this opportunity, gave me the chance to have an imprint with the sort of resource and support and guidance of Hopeless Records. And that was huge. It was awesome to have the opportunity to have creative control, to start to think about building a roster of artists that I'd like to at some point support or, you know, work with in some way, and as well as, you know, put out Hottie stuff.
And who are you working with right now?
Well, I'm not totally sure, I guess, like what I can say out loud just yet. As far as Snack Shack goes, I want to let me do one more off the ground and then sort of bang out the logistics on how exactly I can start to build the roster and curate a group of artists that I'm excited about. So nothing like of public knowledge currently.
Okay, but there's stuff going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I'm sort of moving the pieces around a little bit. Pom Pom Squad. Yes, Mia reached out in the process of finding a producer for that record. And I think that she may have reached out to a handful of folks. But she sort of pitched this idea. You know, we probably had been friends on the internet before, but I'd never really talked to them in person. And I was just kind of a fan of the EP. So they reached out to me. Mia pitched this wonderful idea of sort of like her grunge influence and her, you know, Courtney Love inspired rock, plus this sort of wall of sound, Phil Spector, big room, Motown style arranging. And she was like, how do we combine those things? And I was like, that's an awesome idea. Let's figure it out. And yeah, we clicked, and I got to spend a couple weeks in New York making that record, and they're killing it now. So I love to see the Pom Pom Squad come up.
How did you I'm always a nerd about the technical stuff. So what steps did you take to achieve that particular sound, that like grunge meets wall of sound, Phil Spector style?
It's tough. I mean, it was definitely, both of those genres are particularly well recorded in history. And I think especially as grunge became very commercial, it's like some of the best rock recording of all time. And Motown has always sort of been, you know, walk in with a song, walk out with a hit record method of making music. So I'm so sorry. My drummer's staying with us right now. We're about to leave for a tour with Death Cab. So he just walked in. The dogs are going crazy. I'm so sorry to interrupt that. Apologies.
It's all good. I love dogs, so I don't mind.
Yeah, I love them too, but they get talkative sometimes.
I do.
So what was I saying? Oh yeah, so we tracked it in a studio in Sunset Park in Brooklyn that Adam, who used to run Shea Stadium and hopefully is bringing back Shea Stadium in Brooklyn soon. So he has a little studio in the place that he lives, and we just sort of got creative with the gear available to us. We brought in string players, we brought in a harp player, and we spent 2 weeks really dialing in the sounds.
You mentioned that you're going to be going out on a tour with Death Cab soon. I guess I want to know, like, what was when did you first get into Death Cab music, and like, how did the tour come about?
I feel like I've been listening to them since I was like 12 or 13. I mean, that was definitely early intro to like indie rock, emo adjacent kind of early aughts music that I love so much. So yeah, they sent over a tour offer, and I was like, this seems completely fake, but obviously it wasn't. Like, you know, like the people talking about it were people who like were not pranking me, which was awesome. But, you know, like it was like formal through my agent, but like, yeah, I was just completely blown away. And I was like, well, I'll believe it, you know, when we show up at the show. And so now we're leaving tonight to go to Vegas, and we're doing Vegas tomorrow, Reno, and then Napa with them. And I'm really excited. It's been great having the band back in town, getting ready to play that and to play an album release show.
So you said you were 12 or 13 when you got into them. What was their album that was out then? What were the songs that you remember getting into?
I feel like the first record that I sort of became aware of was probably Transatlanticism. That came out like approximately when I was like maybe 6th grade. And definitely it has hits on it that that continue to be hits for Death Cab. And it's such a beautiful album. And I got into it. I sort of like fell out of love with it for a little while. And then later listening as an adult, like when I was like, you know, 19 or 20, I realized kind of how much wonderful production stuff is going on. And Chris Walla really became like kind of an icon for me, as well as Ben Gibbard being such a wonderful lyricist and storyteller in his music. And yeah, and as a drum, I mean, it's an all-star cast on that record for sure. Jason McGurr playing drums. He's one of the most inventive, wonderful drummers, seemingly a cool person. I guess I'll find out tomorrow. But I mean, they all seem like great guys, and they were really turning the genre on its head when they were making those early aughts records.
And as you look forward to this tour, I mean, we're you know, trying to find a new normal during this pandemic. Are you feeling comfortable or anxious, or where are you at mentally?
I would say, you know, I want to be cautiously optimistic with shows coming back. I am really appreciating the venues and the bands that are requiring masks and vaccination records, and sort of just making it a safe environment, not only for the audience, but also for themselves to be able to keep doing it. So yeah, you know, I think like it is a possibility that we continue being able to do live shows and festivals and all the fun stuff. But yeah, I think as long as people sort of remain cautious and try and keep the people around them safe, I'm hoping we'll be okay.
Does your tour have COVID policies?
Yeah, it's going to be pretty serious. I mean, there's not going to be anybody allowed backstage who's not going on stage, basically. There is regulations for the venues as far as like, you know, what the audience has to present, or whether that's a COVID negative test or vaccination card or whatever. But Death Cab is taking it really seriously, and it's been affirming for me, at least, to know that like my band will be safe and my people that are in the crew.
I'd love to hear a little bit about your band name during this particular era, because I feel like, to me anyway, that this idea of the Illuminati has become more and more prevalent as certain conspiracy obsessed groups have gained political power. And I'm curious if, as I sort of even jokingly self-identifying as Illuminati, if you've gotten any internet strangeness.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you know, I think just by having that word in the username and in the like in the social media sphere, like as like titles on my Twitter and my Instagram and stuff, there's just naturally like bots that are like, or maybe they're real people, I don't know, like searching for code words and sending messages to myself and to my followers often. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of spammy stuff that ends up happening. And to me, it was just a fun band name. And a band name that I had in a list of dumb band names on my phone, and I liked it and it fit the music. And, whether people like the name or hate it, it seems to be memorable. So it's both working to my advantage and disadvantage in some ways.
Well, thank you so much for taking time. I know you've got a busy day. You're heading out on tour, and we really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Sorry the dogs were firing off.
No, we love it. We are pro dog at Consequence, and we're not afraid to say it.
Hell
All
yeah.
right. Thank you so much, Sarah. Have a good day.